This is the Bush League Huddle podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Roger Mecca, and I have once again my trusty co-hosts, Nacc and Fab. Guys, we had an epic sports weekend this past weekend. We had the men's Final Four. We had the women's Final Four. We have NBA games that matter because the playoffs are starting. But yesterday and Saturday, Fab, we watched WrestleMania, and that was absolutely epic. It was, as I was talking with Knack, like amazing because it brought back so many memories.
100%.
And we watched it. We watched it together at my place, and I know Knack, you saw some highlights. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like we were just saying, it's those really the high. Like I'm not really into it anymore. As I mentioned on last week's podcast, it's always been it's too repetitive. The same guy always wins and whatnot. So I'm pretty happy to see that he actually lost. But just seeing highlights and hearing that Undertaker song come on like that brought back childhood memories like crazy. Like that's what really stuck with me. Like I watched it a million times today, just like on repeat. It was just crazy to hear it. And then he comes in, choke slams the Rock. It's like, wow, there's two guys like I watched growing up, right? So, I mean, I didn't watch WrestleMania, but just even those takeaways were
Yeah,
were,
definitely
were
hit me
pretty
in the
cool to
feels
see.
too. I was juiced the entire weekend. Like I was just I can't remember the
Yeah,
last time I had so much fun watching a wrestling pay-per-view event, and it was really good. And I was so invested in the storyline. Like ever since Triple H has really taken over the storyboard concept and everything, the direction that they're going in is super exciting. Very happy for Cody Rhodes. Fed up with that bloodline bullshit. Nah, I was fed up. Come on, it's fucking 1,400 days. He's a champion. It's enough now. You know, come on.
throw up the ones.
It doesn't
Keep
make
throwing up the ones, baby.
sense.
They're gonna be back. The
It
bloodline's
doesn't
gonna
make
be back,
Yeah,
sense,
yeah,
baby.
man.
probably
Like,
not.
The
Who
bloodline's
cares?
gonna be
But
back.
he was on Pat McAfee today. Huh? John Cena and Cody
John Cena,
Rhodes,
yeah,
yeah,
and
they
I
were.
love that man. And
Yeah,
yeah.
shout out,
I didn't know John
yeah,
Cena was 47.
I didn't know he was that bald.
yeah.
I yeah,
He
that
needs
was bad
he
too.
needs he needs to take your route, Knack, and just clear it all out, man.
Just
He'll
clear it
look as
out,
good as
baby.
you. He'll look as
He
good as
doesn't.
you.
You
I don't
gotta
think he
you
has a
gotta
nice
fire
enough
it
head
before it
though. He
quits
You
doesn't
on
have
have
a nice enough head to do this.
We've always told Knack he has the perfect bald head.
you.
Like you have just an epic, like symmetrical, like perfect head to be bald. Like it suits you so well.
And on that note,
I made him awkward. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
pause,
Yeah,
pause, heavy
On that
pause,
note,
heavy
so
pause.
we have a really fun show today. You could catch our previous shows where we broke down obviously the free agency class. We broke down the QB prospects and as well as the wide receiver prospects. So we thought it'd be a great time to talk about the running back prospects, which is an underrated class, as well as the main tight end prospect Brock Bowers in this class. So we're gonna dive into those, the running backs and the tight ends. But first, we'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk a little bit about the big trade that happened between the Bills and the Houston Texans last week that sent Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans for a bevy of picks. Fab, any initial thoughts on the deal, and where do you think Diggs gets drafted from a fantasy landscape in 2024?
So my initial thoughts of the trade was that it was very good for the Texans offense as a whole. Very good for CJ Stroud. It's another weapon for him, specifically a weapon that can work in the slot. So while I was going over some of the stats and I guess the routes that are being ran by Tank Dell and Nico Collins and all that, like they're mostly working on the outside. Diggs was split a little bit more in the slot when he was in Buffalo, but I think now he's probably going to take on a much larger role to that respect. And ultimately, Diggs going to Houston destroys the value that might have existed for Robert Woods, John Michie, Noah Brown, and all those guys. I think it eats into their target share more than it would to Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I really think that those two guys won't be affected as much. Now, with that being said, all three of those wide receivers, in my opinion, are not wide receiver ones. Like they're not in the top 12. They're not even the top 15. Nico Collins is more of a mid-tier wide receiver too. I think Diggs as well. Tank Dell is more like it's hard to rank those three. I'll be honest with you, but I don't see any one of them being able to like propel your team and be a wide receiver one. Like maybe before the Diggs trade, you can argue that Nico Collins was like a wide receiver 12 on the year, 13, like right around like that sweet spot. Now I'll be hard pressed to have that argument or even have the discussion. And Diggs,
Yeah,
honestly, if like I think Diggs is gonna have a lot more value in PPR, which works great for us because that's really how we operate. If you're drafting Diggs in a half point PPR or standard, which I don't even know if those even exist anymore, but let's just say they do. Like I don't think that Diggs necessarily have that much value. I think he's going to be working a lot of receptions. I'm not expecting him to put up like 1,500 yards like he normally would. I'm not expecting him to put up like double digit touchdowns. I think he's going to be very, very serviceable wide receiver too, especially in PPR. But I think if you're looking for yardages and all that, Nico's going to be the guy. Tank Dell's going to be the guy. And
yeah,
um, and I think it's going to. This is a much better football move than it is a fantasy football move. This is going to help the Texans' offense
yeah,
as a whole. I actually think this opens up more for Joe Mixon. I think this helps him a lot too in the running game because now all of a sudden the defense has three very good wide receivers to that they have to be held accountable for. So overall, like I'm if I'm leaving the draft with Diggs as my wide receiver one, I got concerns. But this is a good move.
yeah. I would
Yeah,
agree with. I would agree. So, Nak, before I let you jump in,
I think
sorry, Nak, just before I let you jump in, I wanted to just look at quickly, like on Fantasy Pros, what are the composite rankings of like Diggs and Nico Collins? They had Diggs in kind of like this tier four range. I think kind of what you alluded to, Fab. Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Keenan Allen. I think that makes sense for him, especially after the year he had. I think a lot of people have some reservations on how he performs in the second half. Nico was closer actually to the tier three range, so he was still rated above Diggs, closer to the DJ Moore, Debo, Drake, Pittman range, which I would also agree. And to your point on the slot, Diggs was 35% in the slot last year. Tank Dell was 28% in the slot. So I think Tank Dell is the one who, if I had to think of a loser, is probably Dalton Schultz
yeah.
and
And
Tank
Nico
Dell.
was 20% in the
Not
slot. Yeah,
exactly. He's a prototypical X.
100%.
He's always going
Yeah.
to be on the left side. Nak, any thoughts on the on Diggs as a whole?
well, I mean, if we go back to episode 2, I did call him likely not staying with the Bills, likely not getting traded, and saying that they would be make have a strong push for Brian Thomas. Um, to draft him as their wide receiver and fit. I knew there was something that there was smoke with fire. I'm going to play devil's advocate and kind of disagree. I don't disagree that he's in a lower tier than he's normally been, but I think if we look back at his second half years, where he struggled was really in the cold. He's now going to Houston. He's going to be playing indoors. I think that's going to open up a lot more for Diggs. And Diggs is an alpha man. I don't think he goes in there and just kind of takes a back seat. I think he's still going to command the ball. I think that's what his presence does. And I think CJ Stroud is going to want to find him early and often. Also, by taking away 3 years off of his contract and making it a 1 year deal, he has that opportunity to ball out and get paid, one last time before retirement. So I think all in all, great football move, but he has like they gave him all the Houston did everything right, right? They gave him everything possible to kind of break out again. Hey, look, maybe they sign him again next year, but I think that by removing years, I think that kind of goes out the door because they're going to have to pay other people. And I think Diggs won't fall into that category, but they're kind of in all in mode. So I think, yeah, like to Fab's point, I think those 1,500-yard years are probably long gone, especially with a lot of mouths to feed in Houston. But I think I'm going to disagree with him not being in a more top tier echelon. I think you'd be okay, maybe not drafting him with your first round pick or a second round pick. But if you had him as your wide receiver one with a good couple good wide receivers, like I don't see that being a huge, huge, huge
Mm.
issue
I
personally.
think a little rich for me, especially someone who had him and depended on him when I faced UNAC in the finals. But I think WR one, WR two. Nak, I want to stay with you because you're a resident Bills aficionado, Josh Allen aficionado. Just quickly, how does this trade impact positively or negatively the Bills and Josh Allen and the rest of the wide receiver room there?
Well, as it stands right now, from what I heard, Josh Allen had to sign off on this deal, and he did. So I think there was, yeah, I think there was, look, we always say like, oh, we thought he loved this player and he loved, but at the end of the day, no player on the same roster is going to really talk bad about a teammate, especially out in like dirty laundry. Like it's very rare that this guy's going to really, oh yeah, he's a huge problem in the locker room, and he's like, there was never going to be a time where he was going to say that about him. If you say directly impacts, I think if the team as it is right now, where you have what Curtis Samuel is your number one, or Shakir is your number one, yes, very big, very impactful for sure. They're going to have to draft a wide receiver or two this draft, or do something on the trade front. But I don't think that they have really much cap to do that and get someone as close to a Stefon Diggs. So I think they're going to have to do it to the draft. I think they're a great candidate for a trade up. So I think they're a team to watch to trade up to get one of those top four wide receivers. I don't. I think it's a stretch to get like a Harrison or an Neighbors, but maybe a Thomas or an Odunze, depending on how they do it. But I think as it stands right now, Buffalo's in trouble in the wide receiver department. But we'll talk more about that maybe
Yeah,
after the
yeah, I think
draft.
they're a top candidate to run more 12
Yeah,
personnel. One running back, two tight ends. So I think Knox and Dalton Kincaid can have pretty big factors together. And I think they're gonna definitely lean into James Cook. Let James Cook
I was gonna say,
as
yeah,
as
no
was the
choice.
moniker on that. Fab, if nothing else to add on that, I'll move on to the tight ends.
Uh, yeah,
Because yeah, yeah, okay. So this Brock Bowers is going to be our main focus from a tight end perspective for this draft. Tight end out of Georgia, likely to be a top 10 pick. And I wanted us to kind of dive into the tight ends and Brock Bowers because we have a buddy in our league, Robbie, who early on last year was talking about how just basically eradicate the tight end position from fantasy football because I think he had one of the top tight ends if I'm not mistaken. There was a really lack of good tight end production early on in the year. Kelsey was a bit slow. Hawkinson was a bit slow. Kittle was a bit slow as well. And then by the end of the year, we saw Laporta come on strong, McBride come on strong. Evan Ingram, Fab, to our chagrin, looks like an absolute stud right
yeah,
now.
yeah, no,
After he left the Giants,
yeah.
so
It was me. It was
I
me.
wanted to use this a little. Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to use this as a bit of a first of all, Knack, what do you think of Brock Bowers as the unanimous tight end one? His profile as a prospect and what his best team fit, and then Fab afterwards. Let's dive into where does Bowers fit into that tight end landscape. Knack, you wanna kick us off with this?
For sure. Well, look, at 6'3", 240, he's an absolute beast. It's surprising because I looked into it, and his touchdown production surprisingly fell after every year in college. So his freshman year, he had 13 TDs, and then it went from seven and then to six. I mean, I know he only played
Yeah,
10 games last year, so it could have been a little bit better. He runs a 4.48, which is like
beast.
crazy
Yeah,
for
super fast.
his size tight end. Like he's your prototypical moving the chains tight end. A good safety blanket for a QB. I think best fits you're looking at, like, look, yeah, the obvious one would be the Chargers. Um, I think Indy, the Jets, the Panthers, the Bucks, even Cincy could use like a better tight end. The Chargers, like we said, is the most like logical choice everyone kind of sees. But the thing I saw a lot of, I was watching some tape today, and he's not a great blocker. So maybe Harbaugh is not going to really like that as much as a guy who likes to a team that he likes to run the ball with. But I mean, look, his offensive skill set is really off the charts, and he can play wide. He can create all sorts of mismatches on the field. So, I mean, yeah, he's lights out, and for sure the number one. Obviously, I don't think there's a real close second in this draft. Definitely not in the first round, anyways.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know there's an Iowa tight end that's in the draft, and Iowa always, Dallas Clark, Laporta, Kittle. So you have to assume that guy, which I don't remember his name, you have to assume he's probably going to be a decent prospect in the NFL. Fab, in terms of where Bowers fits in the tight end landscape from a fantasy perspective, I'm gonna name you the top 13 guys or so according to fantasypros.com from in terms of their composite rankings. Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, Kittle, Kincaid, Njoku, Pitts, Goddard, Ferguson, TJ. Where does he fit from a drafting standpoint? And tight end is tough in terms of when to draft. We have our buddy Lucas, who I think doubled down on last year. He had Kelsey and
Yeah.
Kittle. He went into that. Where do you see Bowers fitting into this
Yeah, I think
rankings?
a lot of it has to do with where he's going to be drafted to, what team he's going to be drafted to. Like Nacc mentioned, the Chargers. I think the Chargers are a good play, and Bowers actually has some pretty decent blocking ability. So just by the fact that Harbaugh wants to get like an offensive tackle, but they also need a wide receiver, getting a top tier tight end could actually fit a few of those needs. So it would be interesting for him to go there, and then all of a sudden you have Herbert that actually has a proper passing target to throw to. So that could be super interesting. Everyone is mocking him to the Jets. And I was doing some digging to see when was the last time that Aaron Rodgers was throwing to a tight end of this talent. And it was like
Mhm.
Jimmy Graham post his New Orleans days, right?
No, no, no. Even early, Jermichael Finley,
Jermichael Finley, but
like
he didn't have,
Jermichael
yeah, but
Finley.
the numbers to Jermichael Finley weren't
He
that,
made tight ends.
No, they weren't.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think this is fair to say if you were to go to the Jets and assuming that Aaron Rodgers is healthy again, this is probably going to be the easily the most talented tight end he's ever thrown to. So I thought that was super
Yeah.
interesting in that sense. I know he's a rookie and all that, so I don't want to give him too many flowers. I see this guy going like at the end of the tight end one tiers. Like the names that you rattled off, a lot of them come with asterisks, in my opinion. Kyle Pitts, we don't know. I want to think that Kyle Pitts is going to do well. I think he finally has a chance to do well. I know you're out on him. I'm giving the guy another
Out.
chance. David Njoku, I love him. He's not going to have a good of a season, in my opinion, just because of Deshaun Watson throwing to him versus how he was doing with
Oh
Joe
wow.
Flacco.
You're that down on Deshaun
Yeah,
Watson
yeah,
that you think he'll
100%.
take it.
Yeah, I even
Wow.
like Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper's gonna have a
He's
down
funny
year
to remember.
again because of Deshaun Watson. Like I give the guy a mulligan in his first year back after all of the rub and tugs and all that stuff. I gave him a mulligan after that. It's an explicit podcast. Fuck.
I was not expecting that.
Sorry, what did I say? Put the kids to sleep, ladies and gentlemen. So I give him a mulligan after that one, and then the following year he played decently well. Then he got injured and went down, but you just saw how much more productive his weapons could be with a different style of quarterback. So just for that, it gives me pause a little bit with David Njoku until I can see more. The top three top four are there. You can argue he can go 8-7 in my opinion if he goes to the right spot. Like Dalton Kincaid, I like him too. He's going to get a much more focal point there. George Kittle, I think, might be on the downside. I like Trey McBride a lot.
Mm.
I like Trey McBride a
Yeah,
lot.
I think
Yeah, I
everyone
like
likes
Trey
him.
Yeah,
McBride a
yeah,
lot. Like
of
I
course, of
see
course.
him, I see him like as a low end tight end one to start off with. I'd be okay with that. I know there's gonna be guys going to reach for him in the draft. I think he's going to go like tight end like
Yeah.
5 or 4. I'm like, I mean, it's not impossible. It's just I would exercise caution. That's all.
So as you guys know, I've been a big proponent of the Chargers trading down or picking him at 5. I think that's a little rich,
I
but I'm a
agree.
big proponent of Bowers God, I was about to say San Diego. I still say San Diego sometimes. To
I still
to,
do
to the
that.
Chargers. Knack, to your point, I agree. He's not an elite blocker, but Harbaugh had Vernon Davis, and one of the really solid tight ends that he had when he was with the 49ers. And I keep preaching the Greg Roman, John Harbaugh, like they've always had tight ends. Greg Roman he's had Charles Clay, he's had Mark Andrews, he's had Vernon Davis in the past. When they were both at Stanford, they had Kobe Fleener. They had like early, or even
Wow.
late
Clean.
Zach Ertz. So they are a tight end. They are a tight end ball club. Like the way they run their team is with the tight end. I could see more as in line, so like right next to the tackle, but like as an H back two, or obviously he could split it wide receiver. But I think that'll really unlock their offense because they're going to be a ball control running offense as well. So that's why I still think they're not necessarily going to prioritize the wide receiver. But in terms of where he would fall in the fantasy landscape, I would not be surprised that I think that Evan Ingram, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews, right? He's coming back
Yeah.
from I think it was a broken ankle situation with the hip drop
Yes.
tackle. Uh,
But
he
he played.
he did
He
play.
played
You're
in the
right. Yes,
playoffs.
you're right. Good. Yeah, yeah. He did play. But I still see like that Evan Ingram, George Kittle area where I could see him getting drafted. But we know how it is. Top round one guys sometimes get overvalued, sometimes get
Well,
overdrafted. Uh, and with the quarterback that he has, like if you look
I
at
mean,
you know Kittle, Kincaid could have some opportunity, but there's Knox there as well. The Njoku factor, I think that's a good point. Pitt's hard to trust. Goddard is always up and down depending on who Jalen Hurts like. Ferguson, I'm a
yeah.
big fan of, and we can't forget T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I could see him in the tight end, like the fifth, sixth range
I
potentially
think that
wow, fifth or
of the
sixth.
tight end of the tight ends.
Well, look, to Fab's point, like I'm definitely taking him over like an Njoku. Um, Man, I don't know some
well, you know
But
what
but
it is.
but
25.
but Nak,
Wow.
that's
Honestly, in order for him to work out though, in order for him to work out at that spot, he's got to be this year's Sam Laporta
Yeah.
breakout style, or else that's big. Depending on okay, the fifth tight end. Where does the usually the fifth tight end come off the board? Is it like round 8? Is it round
so Nak.
like I think Laporta was drafted in like the
Yeah.
last
Yeah,
round
Yeah.
last year or
around
second to last.
around that time. But Nak, like fifth or sixth would be again Evan Ingram, George Kittle. I think in again I'm using the composite fantasy pros ranking. I think Njoku's a little low personally, like considering the year he had. But in the Ingram, Kittle, Kincaid range, I think that's fair. Factoring in
Ingram doesn't have wide receivers there anymore, right? Like Calvin really just went out of town and he balled with him there.
absolutely
Like
fair
I
point.
think Evans is Ingram. I think
Yeah.
Ingram is
I agree.
perfectly ranked. Njoku, look, like you said, Fab said, like Deshaun Watson doesn't like tight ends that much. Like it just doesn't work out. I think Cooper still has a good year on the wide receiver side, but tight end side, I think Njoku definitely slides down my list. I would go with
Hmm.
caution with him as well. But and Ingram, I think he's perfectly ranked, man. And Kittle, like I think I'm just gonna grab the better name. You know, if I'm in round 8 and Kittle's still there, like I'm
You're
gonna
gonna
grab
take the
Kittle
proven
before I grab
commodity. Yeah.
Bowers. You know,
Well, Raj, you keep on mentioning Fantasy Pros ranking, right? They have Brock Bowers ranked 17th.
Interest 17. That's
Yeah.
tight
Again,
ends.
again, this
interesting.
is composite
Wow.
rankings. Take with it what you want. They have him
Interesting.
ranked as people have ranked him as high as 8 and as low as 27. So they put a composite ranking based on that. 8, 9, 10. I think that's safer for me. The whole tier thing. The drop off between tier one
I
and
agree.
tier two is huge, but the differences between the rankings within tier two, in my opinion, like all the guys that we mentioned, Kittle, Kincaid, Njoku, Pitts, I don't think it's that big. So if you put him in that ranking, he's still in some pretty good company. And I think he's going to have a very decent season. I just don't think he's going to be, tier one esque. I think he's going to have weeks where he finishes as a top 5, and most of the weeks he's probably going to finish as around the 12, 11, 10,
Yeah.
and it's going to spike up and down.
Yeah, it depends
Yeah,
where he
and
goes.
and and I
That's
think
what it's gonna
yeah,
depend where he
exactly. And
goes.
I think yeah, to conclude on this point, I think exactly it. That's exactly what I was gonna say, Nak. It depends on where he goes. If it's the Chargers, he is also tight end one. He's
100%.
he's number one
Yeah.
option. He's number one option
I
there. If he
think his
goes to
stock
the
goes up if he goes to
Without
the
a doubt.
Chargers. Yeah.
Jets is very interesting, but then he's targets are scarce with Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall. We know how good he is as a pass catcher. The Bengals definitely need a tight end, but I think they signed someone in free agency, so it's going to be interesting to see. All I know is our buddy Robbie was completely wrong. We are not we're not removing tight ends
Well,
from our league or any league whatsoever. Like this position, it could go like there's like Jawan Johnson. We didn't even talk
yeah.
about him. He was really good at the end of the season for the Saints. So this position is super deep, and it's going to be really interesting to see where Bowers falls.
To be fair, not to take Robbie's side
Definitely.
here, but when he was arguing that point, and I'm not saying I was going to remove tight ends at all. No, no, hold on. I never said I'm
Here
going to
we
remove
go.
tight ends at all. It's just that, like this year, last year, excuse me, tight ends are so deep, so deep, and for
Nuts.
such a while, tight ends were like it was like 3 guys, and if you don't get any of those 3 guys, like who gives a shit? Now tight ends are fun. The position is exciting. Like you can get guys that have 10 receptions a game and it's fun again. But at the time I can sort of understand Robbie's point on that a little bit. Again, I'm not for removing any position in our lineup, including kickers, So
That'll be the next. The next
zero.
show will be us talking about
Absolutely not.
removing kickers.
But I mean, but
We need
remember
to
the
have a
thing
show.
Well,
is,
we
see, like,
could.
yeah. But I'm saying you had to pay for those tight
Yeah.
ends, right? Like
No,
those top three guys that we're
your
naming, like
argument
you
is
paid
valid,
for them,
Nac. We had
right?
this
Like
conversation. Your argument is 100% valid. I agree with
you
you. Yeah.
you pay for them, right? Like, hey, Lucas took one in the first round. You know what I mean? Like you're paying for that first round tight end
Yeah.
grade. Like your team,
100%.
obviously, your next part of your team is going to suffer
Yep.
somewhere, but you're paying for it. If you don't want a tight end, you don't like tight ends,
I
don't
agree.
draft them.
This
You know, like
this is
it's
not the
more.
year. I think I personally, for my draft strategy, I could see it in years past where you say, "Hey, top two, let's pick like a
Yeah.
Kelsey." For me now, this is not the year. This is not the time anymore
Zero.
to do that because
Zero.
again, it's 15
Never.
deep almost. Like so.
Yeah, but even talk
Yeah,
about
you're
Pat
getting a guy.
Fryermuth.
Fat Knack, dude,
Like,
that's your guy.
It's
That's your
it's my
guy.
guy. He's been look. It's been disappointing since like that second round grade. But look, he's had poor QB play. That's had and then Matt Canada. Won't say
imagine
enough about that
imagine
guy.
Bowers
But
drops. Yeah.
hopefully resurgent
Imagine
year.
Bauer gets drafted by Chicago.
No, they have commit. I don't.
Just
No.
just throwing it out there. Like,
Yeah, I don't think they
imagine,
go. I'd go do yeah, but
assuming
I'd
it.
go
Yeah, no,
Dunze
I agree.
before
Assuming
There's
the
no
tight
Dunze's there.
end, right?
Fab. There's zero chance they have commit and they signed Everett, I believe, from the Rams as well. You signed
They
Garrett
did.
Everett.
Everett,
Not
Everett.
the Rams, from the Chargers.
From man, geez, they why do they have two teams in LA? It's so confusing, and they have the same colors. All right, moving on to the running backs. So we saw there was a ton of spending this free agency on running backs, and I think a lot of analysts felt that is that a precursor to say that this running back draft class is weak? And I'm not entirely sure because if you look at previous draft classes, this one might be similar to the 2022 one where there was no first round running back. As we recall in 2022, there was Brees Hall, who was not in the first round, James Cook and Walker, those guys were all in the second round. Rashad White was in the third round, Damian Pierce, Zamir White were in the fourth round. Even if you go back to 2021, Ramondre, fourth round, Khalil Herbert, sixth round, you get the point. Jonathan Thomas, second round. So you could get really good running backs in the later rounds. So Fab,
Jonathan Taylor.
what did I say?
Yeah.
You said Jonathan
I was
Thomas,
thinking
just to correct
Jonathan
you.
Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement. I
Yeah, that's exactly.
one of the best
Okay.
sitcom theme songs. Like Home Improvement theme song was so good. Fab, who is your favorite running back from this year's class, and what team would they most thrive in?
This, I might go with the easy answer here, but I really like Jonathan Brooks. There's a lot of guys that are ranked very similarly. Like Trey Benson is really nice, Blake Cormer's really nice, but Jonathan Brooks to me stands out a little bit more than the rest of them. So he was behind Bijan Robinson last year, so he didn't get that much play. And this year, being the number one back, he unfortunately tore his ACL. So he didn't get a full season under his belt, but in the 10 games that he did play, he was putting up very, very, very similar numbers to Bijan Robinson. Very similar. Talking about same yards per carry, very similar touchdown progression. He was looking really, really good. He has great vision, great contact balance. Um, his burst is very good for a guy of his size as well. He has natural hands in the receiving game. This guy is a nice size back, looking at about 6 foot, 207 pounds. The positive side about his ACL tear, if there is one, obviously the fact that he's young. It's also a clean tear. It's not a multi-ligament. So there's not too much of an issue, or at all for that matter, of there being him not being able to make it for training camp and start for the beginning of the year and all that. So I think that isn't necessarily playing a role on where he's going to get drafted. I still think he's going to be the first running back drafted off the board. I think more likely than not, he goes in the second round. But now I was just looking at the NFL draft order. Arizona Cardinals have 2 first round picks, right? I mean, him going at the back end of round one is not impossible. James Conner is a great running back, but adding an extra little bit of depth in that room would not be a bad thing. and there'd be a lot of offensive power on that team being added within one draft, which I think will be interesting. I think personally, he goes to Dallas. I just think it makes most sense. Dallas is also picking at the end of the first round. They might squeeze in and go in and take him in the first round. I don't think it's impossible, but I feel like it would be the best fit to go to Dallas because you look at Dallas's running back room and it's guys that no one's ever heard of, like Rico Dowell and Scooter something,
Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce
Deuce
Vaughn,
Vaughn.
sure. Like these are guys that had some flashes of interesting plays last year, not to knock them, but I'm pretty sure every Dallas Cowboy fan will say that they need a running back. And someone like Jonathan Brooks definitely fits the bill. His pass protection was second out of all eligible at PFF, out of all the eligible running backs. Sixth best in route running grade as well. There's been some comps to Jamal Charles, which I got super excited about when I read that because I've always been a Jamal Charles fan when he was with the Chiefs. So yeah, I think it'd be super super interesting to see where he goes. If he goes to Dallas, I think it'd be a great fit. He's not a huge back, but like he's easy flowing with his running back style, sort of similar to James Cook in that sense as well. So he could be super super useful with Dallas, even with Arizona. But I think Dallas would be a fantastic fit.
I like that you mentioned the Cardinals. I in my notes I had noted them as well because they have a ton of picks, and James Conner is, as much
Yep.
as we
Yep.
love him, like I'm a big fan of his, but he's getting older as
Mm-hmm.
well. And I think that the Texas,
Yeah, we're
yeah,
Injury prone too.
totally, yeah, last year too. And Texas is a running back factory, as you
yep,
mentioned. Bijan, Roshan,
yep.
he backed
Roshan
them
too.
up. Jamal Charles went to Texas. There's a ton of good history there. Nacc, what other teams need running backs? And either as a who could be a guy either as a starter or even as a complementary guy to some of these running back needy teams for this draft.
Yeah, so I definitely had also like the Cowboys as my number one guy to target a running back. I don't know how big their appetite is to do that with a first round pick. I think I'd be hard pressed to see them go that route again, first round running back. But I also I had Indy as a potential landing spot if he goes later. The Chargers still need kind of someone. They don't really have something there. And then I found maybe interesting the Rams, the Packers, Bucks, like draft a kind of running back. They don't really, besides their top guys on the depth chart, doesn't look too great for any of these teams. Um, like the Rams, Ronnie Rivers,
Yeah.
like a big, huge bat. Like I don't see him really working out. I think they're going to go after a guy, especially they have a lot of picks as well this year. Even the Packers, like they got rid of. Did they
They
retain
re-signed
Bill?
Maximilian.
him, but he's not very
I just
good.
don't see. I
He's
don't.
not very good.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see that. I don't see that very good. Even Indy, like, look, they lost Zach Moss. Jonathan Taylor's been injured. It wouldn't be bad to have like a nice complimentary type guy. The Chargers kind of, you know, revamp their team. It'd be nice to have someone fresh. I guess a name like Corson comes to mind right away. Reunites with
Corm, like
Harbaugh.
Corm.
Um,
Yeah.
over Corum. Where did I say Corson?
Corson.
Corum. I said Corson. Corsim. Shane Corson. No, but like he could be a guy sneaks into the second, maybe the third round. Again, you saw a lot of running backs get signed, so I don't see a lot of running backs going very very high. I don't have one in the first
Yeah.
round at all by my standards. Um, and it's funny you mentioned the Cowboys because it'd be a great fit, and I think whichever running back goes there may have some great potential right off the bat. Where I feel all the other ones would be more. You're going to be playing behind someone to start, and you'd be more fantasy relevant if there's an injury that happens, or if there's a running back really playing bad and you kind of sneak
Yeah.
in. But um, yeah, those are my fits. More complimentary guys than more
Yeah.
than
So,
anything.
so typically the roadmap to rookies getting playing time at running back is pass
Mm,
protection. That you have to be amazing
Yeah.
at pass pro. You have to be able to play on third downs. We saw it with Tajay Spears last
yep.
year, and ball security. So to your point,
That's
Yeah,
a
it's a
huge one.
massive one. So to your point, Fab, you mentioned Jonathan Brooks again. You talked about great on pass pro. That's a really good one. Jalen Wright was probably the second best running back on pass pro. He went to Tennessee, 7 yards per
Yep.
carry. So he kind of fits the bill of like an explosive runner. He had 1,000 yards on 130 carries. I think that could be a really good option for a team that either needs like a complementary guy behind their main back, or someone who could tote the rock, 180 to 220 times. And because I'm a Michigan fan, Nacc, you mentioned Corum. He had 27 touchdowns last year. Like this guy's one of
Yeah.
the most
It's
insane,
insane,
one of the most
insane.
productive runners ever in
Yeah.
college, but not the best athlete. I think he ran like a four, not bad, like a 4.5, 4.6, 5.8. Like he's not the biggest guy, although he did like 26 reps on the bench press. But whenever I see him, I think of, I don't know if you guys remember him, but Doug Martin,
The
his
Mighty
little
Mouse. What?
the
Yes.
Mighty
Yeah.
Mouse little bowling ball. For those listening, Corum just probably the best pure runner from a jump cut vision perspective. There's always two perspectives. There's like the extremely athletic runner who will just power over guys and go with speed, or there's the guy who uses jump cuts, great vision. And I see Corum on that in that front. And I agree with you. Chargers, I know we're talking a lot about the Chargers today, but it makes a ton of sense because he would be reunited with Jim Harbaugh, who hired a ton of staff from Michigan. Like his defensive coordinator is from Michigan. A lot of his strength guys are from Michigan. So I think that would be a really, really good fit. And again, we mentioned Jalen Wright as probably the second best guy in pass protection. So when you're watching the draft and you're thinking of who some of these guys might go to, think of who's really good in pass
Yeah.
pro and who's going to have really good ball security. Um,
For sure. I mean, the philosophy is changing too, right? Like a lot of people are using two backs nowadays. It's not you don't really have too many teams going, your three down back. A lot of teams are trying to keep, I guess, running backs fresh, and it's been working. And I see Corum as a definite complement back right away in the NFL, depending on what situation he goes to. So it could be a sneaky late round pick fantasy
yeah.
wise, depending on, like I said, where he goes. But yeah,
And one other thing that I think was really interesting last year from a running back perspective, there was kind of two guys who came out like surprised everyone. There was Devon A-Chain, obviously. He was a track star. I think he was at like almost 7 yards per carry with the Dolphins, and then there was Tajee Spears, who he didn't get a full workload with the Titans because obviously Derrick Henry was there, but still on third downs he was able to get a few touchdowns. He was big time on pass protection and as a third down back. And I see guys, if we had to think of like who's the Devon A Chain, who's the Tajee Spears of this draft, someone like Bucky
Hmm.
Irving, who same type of size as both of those guys, smaller dude, but can catch the ball. He caught 56 passes last year at Oregon, 7 yards per catch, really good speed. He still carried it over almost 180 times for over 1,000 yards. I think that could be a really interesting play if we were trying to find who's that unheralded guy who could go in this third or fourth round. Do you guys have anyone who might be able to fill that Devon A. Chain, Tajee Spears, unheralded running back out of the draft who might surprise us either in fantasy or in quote unquote real life football?
I was looking at Marshawn Lloyd from USC.
Yes.
He came out like rated super high with his elusive rating. His
Yeah.
yards per attempt were like 7.1 yards per carry in 2023, which is very solid. He didn't have a lot of receiving opportunities, but regardless of that, he still showed a lot of burst. His after the catch ability was ridiculous, and he's one guy where I think that he could go later on, like similar to Devon Achan. I think he was drafted in the fifth round, if I'm not mistaken. This guy can go in the fifth round or later because he's not that much of a well known name, and he could be something special for a team that's just taking a flyer on him. He's it could be super super interesting. I think.
Yeah, I love Marshawn Lloyd, big boomer and bust guy, and obviously played with Caleb at USC, but
Yeah.
has a ton of juice. Knack,
you know what? This guy here, look, he's being compared to his father, so I'm gonna show some love
Oh.
to you know what I'm talking about, Mr.
Yes,
Frank Gore Jr.
yes.
Hey, he's being compared to his dad. His dad was a pretty good player in the NFL. So again, I think he might need some time to kind of get to the NFL level. So I don't think much fantasy real, maybe not fantasy impact right away, but maybe a few games down the line, maybe between in half the year. Like you don't know, he could be a decent sleeper pick. Again, if he's being compared to Frank Gore Senior, I don't know, something could happen. He could definitely be a late round pick. Probably he's probably be picked. I guess
Yeah,
closer to
Yeah,
the
five,
sixth
yeah,
six.
round though.
yeah,
Yeah,
Seventh, maybe slide to the seventh, like depending on who needs someone. But that would be my potential diamond
I,
in the rough
I
that
don't think
late.
I've ever seen a site comp Frank Gore Jr. to anyone other than his dad. Like
Yeah,
it's
I
like
know,
everywhere,
I
just
know.
Frank Gore Jr., Frank Gore. One more guy, if I can, one
Yeah,
more
it's
guy, if I
funny.
can mention, and I messaged you guys in our group chat, Braylon Allen. I don't know if you guys saw this dude, but he's like 6'3", 250 or 240. Like he looks like Brandon Jacobs and Eddie George. Like just
Wow.
like built like a Greek god. Like literally, is massive. Like this guy, I see him like in the on the Cowboys, as just like a bruiser. So that one could be interesting. Obviously, there's Trey Benson. I saw a few
yeah,
comps. So Trey Benson went to FSU. I saw a few comps for him for DeMarco Murray. That was an interesting one. He's like six
yep,
one, 220, ran a 4.4. I think he tested really well at the combine and interviewed really
yeah. I like
well.
Trey Benson a lot. Actually, I
And
was looking at him too, and they're giving him a comp to even Dalvin Cook. He used to be a track star,
yeah,
so the guy is
yeah,
super athletic, crazy athleticism. I think he'd be a very good fit too.
totally. And then there was maybe one last one. There's Audric Estime, another big boy, 6'1". I think he was also like 240, 250, 18 touchdowns at Notre Dame last year, but he only ran a 4.7. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. Doesn't have as much of the as much juice and more of a north south downhill runner who's not going to play much in on third downs due to pass protection. So I really think, and I think we all agree. I speak for everyone that this running back class is underrated, and as we've seen in many other drafts, uh, unlikely to you don't always find a star. It's not always in the first round that the stars come from the running back position. You could get some guys from the second and third round. So um, I think that's it, guys. That's that. We just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the tight ends, the landscape on that front. Again, the strong running back class, and obviously Stefon Diggs getting traded to the Houston Texans. So thank you all for listening. As always, please follow us on all relevant social media channels. We're at the Bush League Huddle on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter without the E, and you could find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio. We're on everything, guys. We're any channel you listen to your podcast, audio, video, FM radio, not yet, but soon. Sirius XM, not yet, but soon. We're gonna be there. So on behalf of Fab and Nacc, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Peace out.
Peace.
Goodbye.